We're going to add HTML elements to our web page. So let's get to it. The first thing we want to do in our document is declare the document type. Now, this is going to tell the browser which version of HTML we're using. Now, you might be saying, hey, I don't see a version number here, and you are correct. To make it simple, they decided that leaving out the version number will just use the most current version. Now, we want to avoid something called Quarks mode, which is the mode compatible for websites created prior to the widespread adoption of web standards. Now, this needs to be first because before we can start rendering any HTML, we need to know which version of HTML we're using. Also, if we're going to be using an HTML validator, it also needs to know which version of HTML it needs to make sure this is valid with. We're going to put our HTML into two sections, inside of our head element as well as our body element. Now, inside of our document, there should be only one head element and only one body element. Body element is going to contain things that we can see, such as our headings, our paragraphs, our images, our hyperlinks, with the exception being our comments. Our comments will not be rendered in the browser. Now, in the head element, it's going to contain machine-readable information, or in other words, metadata about our document. So it's going to have things like the character set that we're using, our title, maybe some some scripts for our JavaScript, or some style sheets for our CSS. We're going to take a look at some of the things we can place inside of the head element. Starting off with the title element, whatever we place for the contents of the title element will be visible in a browser tab or the browser bar. The other element we're looking at is the meta element. The meta element provides metadata about our HTML document. In this case, we're setting the character set metadata equal to UTF-8. What exactly does that mean? Let's take a look. Char set is short for character set. Computers send and store data as ones and zeros. So how these ones and zeros get converted back to characters, well, that depends on which particular character set you're using. The first popular character set was ASCII, short for American Standard Code for Information Interchange. Now, it only used 7 bits, so it was very compact, which provided 128 codes, which, if English is your primary language, it's going to get your entire alphabet as well as many of the common symbols. But looking at our map down here of countries that use English as their primary language, you could see there are many countries that do not. So obviously, this wasn't going to work for everybody. This is where UTF-8 steps in, short for Unicode Transformation Format 8-bit, which is going to give us more than 1 million codes, which will cover most languages, with many languages being added every day. Now, you math folks out there are probably pointing out there are not 1 million plus possibilities in only 8 bits. You are correct. So in the first 8 bits, there's 1 bit that's going to be there to signal whether to use the next 8 bits as part of that same code. So if you want to learn more about it, check it out on Wikipedia. It's really interesting. So UTF-8 has exploded over the years. Even the HTML specification encourages the use of UTF-8. Another fun fact is that Ken Thompson, one of the creators of the Golang language, created UTF-8 in 1992. Another creator of Golang, Rob Pike, was working on the Plan 9 operating system with him at the time. So just some interesting little tidbits. As we mentioned previously, comments that we place in our HTML will not be rendered in the browser. Now, at first, you may not find comments super useful, but trust me, at some point, you're going to ask yourself, why did I write this code 6 months ago at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday? And the comments are going to tell you the exact purpose of that code. Also, as you become part of a larger team, communication will become more vital, and comments are a big part of that communication. And finally, at some point, you're going to start using frameworks, and there's some frameworks that create code documentation by parsing out those comments for that code. We're to use the image element to place images into our web page. Now, images are linked, not inserted into our original response. So we're going to use the source attribute to tell us the URL or the path to our file. Now, in this instance, we're using a relative path. We could use an absolute one, but in this instance, we're using a relative path. So a relative path is just going to look at where our document is. So our document, this image element, is inside of our index.html file, and it's inside the with directory. Since earth.jpg is in the exact same directory, which is where it first starts looking, we don't have to add anything to it. So earth.jpg is good enough. Now, usually we would have many different image files, and we'd probably just organize them into their own folder, at which we would have to specify what folder that was. We also have our width and our height attributes, which if we don't place any other unit there, it's just going to assume, hey, these are pixels. So we're going to set our image 140 pixels wide and 140 pixels in height. Now, our images also have the alt attribute, short for alternate text. Now, there's several different reasons we would want to use this attribute. For one, our source attribute is going to provide a URL. If an image can be found at that URL, well, great, it's going to be requested and it's going to be rendered in our web page. On the other hand, if we cannot find that image, well, we're going to use this alternate text instead. So whatever we put here is going to be rendered up here. So at least the user knows that, hey, there was supposed to be an image here of the Earth. Another really important reason is that it is used by screen readers. So a screen reader will read this alternate text aloud to those who may be blind or visually impaired. And for our third reason is the potential for search engine optimization. So this text will be read by these search engines to know more about our web page. Now, don't try and spam your web page with a bunch of alternate text, because people have tried this before and Google has caught on to it. So anyway, make sure that you use the alternate attribute. All right, last one before we jump in and start writing our code. So the A element is going to be used to link to different pages. We have our opening tag and our closing tag with our contents in between, which will be displayed in the browser and the user can click on. We have our href attribute, which is short for hypertext reference, which is going to specify the URL the page links to. In this particular instance, we have our protocol, our subdomain, domain name, the name of our website, and a path, which will be handled by particular pieces of code, which we're just going to call handlers. All right, let's go ahead and write some code. For this one, I'm going to be using VS Code. VS Code is an editor that was designed for writing code. Two of the reasons I use it is because it's free and the extensions are free. Extensions are little add-ons that can make writing code very easy. Now, this is a good editor, but there are many other good editors out there as well. So use whatever you feel comfortable with. Looking at our folder structure here, we have a folder called markup with two other folders in it, a folder named with and a folder named without. You might recognize this without folder from a previous example. We have this index.html with no markup. And when we showed that in the example, it just piled everything up and it didn't even pay attention to these carriage returns. It still just piled it all on top of each other. Anyway, we're going to be working inside this with folder, and we're going to be putting our HTML in here. Notice we have our earth.jpg here as well, and this is in the exact same folder as the index.html, which is going to make creating our image element very easy. Anyway, let's go ahead and write some code. I have all of my extensions disabled, but we will go ahead and enable some extensions in the future. So I went ahead and put in an exclamation point, and it's going to give me access to these emit abbreviations. I want to go ahead and just put in the exclamation point and then hit tab, and it's going to give us some boilerplate code. So as you can see here, we have our doc type. It doesn't show the version number, so it's saying, hey, we want the latest version of HTML. We haven't covered this one yet. It's just saying the primary language is English. And then we have our head and we have our body. Body is going to contain the elements that we'll be able to see in our page rendered on the browser, and the head is going to have our metadata. Here we have our title, which is going to show up in the tab of our page. So let's go ahead and change this to my page. And we also have a piece of metadata, our meta tag here, and we're setting a value for our character set to UTF-8, so it knows what encoding to use. These two we haven't covered yet. We're going to go ahead and cover these in a future example because I just wanted to get to actually writing some code and didn't want too much explanation. And let's go ahead and start with the body. So we're going to go ahead and start with an H1 tag. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and put in H1 and hit tab, but if you want to go ahead and write it out, that's fine too. This is nice because it creates the open and closing tags for us. So I'm going to just go ahead and say, welcome to the home page. And then let's go ahead and create our paragraph as well. If you want to, you can go ahead and write out lorem and hit tab, and it'll give you some of that text that isn't really meant to mean anything. But I'm just going to go ahead and borrow it from here. Okay, so if I go over to my browser and I hit refresh, there we go. So we have, well, we have the title, which we have up in the heading. We have our H1 tag, and we have our paragraphs. Let's go ahead and go back to our code. That back over. All right, let's go ahead and create our image element. So I'm gonna go ahead and type img and hit tab. And notice that it automatically creates the source. For one, it can't link an image if we don't have the source in there. And it also has the alt. So it's got some good practices built in there right off the bat. So we need to figure out how can we create our URL, how are we going to link to this earth.jpg. Now we can use a relative link, which means since index is in the same folder, inside the with folder, as earth.jpg is, so we can just put earth.jpg. And we want to make sure that if something goes wrong, it will say earth, and we want it to read, we want e-readers to be able to know what this is as well. Go ahead and hit save, and let's go ahead and go back to the browser. Okay, as you can see, it rendered our image, but it is too big. So let's go ahead and go back and set two more attributes. So we want to go ahead and set the width. Let's go 140. Since I'm not putting any units in here, it's just going to assume it is pixels, and let's go put in the height, and let's put it at 140 as well. So we'll save that. We'll go back to our browser. There we go. 140 by 140 pixels. All right, we'll go ahead and create another paragraph, and I'm just going to borrow from this one. Hi, edit from the future. I just realized that I had typed behind the little box in the bottom right corner. So anyway, we want to go ahead and create our link. So I'm going to go ahead and type A and hit tab. And notice it's going to go ahead and give us our href, our hypertext reference for us. So we want to go ahead and put that in there. So let's go to YouTube. And let's go to the channel Grow Depth, and let's go to playlists. There we go. And we don't have anything in between this opening tag and this closing tag, so we need to put something here. This will be what is seen in the browser and what the user can click on. All right, let's get back to the regular video. If we go to the browser, oh, there we go. We click on this. Let's see if we typed it in correctly. Oh, there we go. So we have made it to the Grow Adept channel playlist. Shameless plug, if you have any interest in the Golang language, it's great. It's a systems language, so you can make a lot of stuff, system level applications, but it's, you can use it for web development or just about anything. Really fast language, not as fast as C. I mean, what is? Except for assembly and C. But anyway, we have some Golang beginner-friendly course. We have some beyond the basics stuff, some Golang web dev, MySQL database stuff. And if you like using Gen for web development, I think it makes web development really nice, really easy. But anyway, let's go ahead and go back to our website here. Anyway, we're going to do a lot more with CSS and making it look good. We're going to do a lot more with JavaScript as well. But we got to learn the HTML part. So if we don't have the parts on the page, well, then we can't make them look good or change their behavior. If you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe. It really does help me out, and it is greatly appreciated. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.